Welcome to this insightful exploration of the historical roots of Naga identity. On today's conversation, we delve into how the Naga community has been designated and identified by the outsiders in the colonial context. With us, we have Dr. Loina Shohe, Assistant Professor from Department of Sociology in Unity College, who is also a member of Board of Studies in NU under School of Sociology and has earned a PhD on a study on socio-cultural impact. With teaching experience of over 6 years, Dr. Loina Shohe has not only presented papers in national seminars, but also has been a guest faculty in Nagaland University during the period 2019 to 2021. Let's get started with the conversation. So let's begin by exploring the historical roots of Naga identity. How has the Naga community been designated and identified by outsiders in the colonial context?
To begin with, when it comes to Naga history, we have to understand that there was a history before the colonial period, and there is a history after the colonial period. Mm-hmm. If we look at how we were identified or how we were designated in the earlier context, there were actually very few writings that we'll come across, mm-hmm. because we were more or less isolated, although we had interactions with our neighboring kingdoms like the Ahoms. Mm-hmm. In some Indian literature, it is said that the Nagas have been referred to, but these are still debatable in the Indian context. However, when we look at how we Nagas identified ourselves in the pre-colonial, pre-British period, we will see that we have always identified ourselves in terms of our village, our clan, our tribe. So that even now, actually, mm-hmm. when we Nagas meet each other for the first time, we often start our conversations, especially when we are not able to gauge each other's tribe or village, right. To the accents. Mm-hmm. We normally go for ki manase, ki buski manase, which tribe, which clan do you belong to?
Very much.
That's how we often do the conversations. Now, these identity markers actually helps us to understand from which lineage, what kind of history that person comes from. Mm-hmm. After the Britishers came, our history has been rewritten. Now, for the Britishers, along with the Britishers, the American missionaries also intruded. Mm-hmm. Both of them intruded in Naga Hills, I should say, because if we look at history, then we will see that it was the Britishers who first encroached into our lands. Mm-hmm. And from their writings, they completely took over the narrative. Our history, the way we converse, were oral narratives for our forefathers. Mm-hmm. But then with the colonial intrusion, written form took place. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that eventually modern education was also replaced the Morang system, our art of knowledge and storytelling, such that we often refer to our history through the written literatures only. And these written literatures were all mostly from the Western perspectives. And if we look at these writings, even some of those ethnographers who used to sympathize with Nagas, J.H. Hutton, even Führer, Heimendorf, we will see in all of their writings how they called us savages or primitive, heathens. They refer to our religion as animism, calling us enemies, calling us headhunters, such that now, after pre-colonial, we Nagas, we also refer to our history. When we went for our field works, for instance, and we ask our elders about our history, most of the time they usually start with, back in those days when our ancestors used to worship the devil, or back in those days when our ancestors were headhunters. So actually these were terminologies, no nomenclatures, which were used by the outsiders through their Western lens to designate us as barbaric or primitive. It fitted into their colonial imagination that we needed to be civilized or that we needed to be disciplined. And after the British experience and with our conversion to Christianity, unfortunately for most of us, in fact many of the Nagas, we are out of touch with the earlier history, pre-British history, pre-colonial, and then we now think their narrative is our narrative.
Do you think certain aspects have influenced the designated terms? Why even we ourselves use such terms to designate ourselves? Do you think there were influences?
Yes, for sure. See, when it comes to knowledge production, okay, and when it comes to creating knowledge, it is usually the elite in a society who have the authority to produce and create knowledge. When the Britishers came with their superior weapons, and although they were not able to administer the whole of Nagaland, what happened was that with their superior weapons, they were able to control the Naga regions, or the Naga Hills as it was called back then. And with the introduction of reading and writing, they completely took over the knowledge production and creating of knowledge. So what happened was that their version became more dominant than our real history or our real version. And that is why, because at that point of time, they were the elites, the Britishers and the American missionaries, they were the elites. And they created that knowledge that we are barbaric, that we are uncivilized, that everything that had to do with our custom and cultures were demonic, that we are heathens. And so this has perpetuated that identity. And post-colonialism also, since we're still continuing with the kind of education system which was introduced by them, we keep referring the literature which were left behind by them. That is why these things have been left unchallenged in most cases.
Do you think there's a disconnect between how Nagas perceive their history and how outsiders identify them after colonialism? Or how do you think this impact Naga community?
As we've been discussing, when it comes to Naga history, it's such a complex. It's not easy to just look at one aspect and answer things in that way. Like I said, there was this pre-colonial history as we know it, and then after that, or during the colonial times, how our history has been created. There are different versions of history now, to say so. So in some ways, no. The way that we perceive how the Britishers created our history, in that sense, we are so connected with our history. Because, see, when it comes to how we identify ourselves, we often hear ourselves, now many of us say that we are from the, our forefathers were headhunters, or say we were enemies, or we practice animism, and so on. So in that way, we're so connected with what the Britishers created history for us. But when it comes to the pre-British, before the British history, many of those are actually lost to us. So I think in some ways we are connected, whereas in some ways we are not connected. And the ones we are connected with also needs reevaluation.
Talking on reevaluation of Naga identity, do you think there's a need or driving factors which can bring in this change or reevaluation? How do you feel it?
Yes. There is certainly a huge need for all institutions, and in fact for societies are usually divided into different domains, social, economic, political, religious, and we often think that they are, especially in Nagaland, we often tend to compartmentalize the different domains. Say for instance, No, when a pastor says something about an election, someone contesting election, or for that matter, certain things related to election, then he is hushed or he is blamed for not being a true pastor involving in politics, for instance. So such kind of scenario plays out in Naga society. We have compartmentalized religious sphere, political sphere, economic sphere, and educational spheres, and we think that they don't overlap. But this is actually very wrong, because in a society all aspects are interrelated, and if one is not doing well, it's going to affect the others as well. So in the academia, like I said, there have already been counter narratives. We're already challenging some of the writings about how the through the Western perspectives we have been portrayed as or projected as, or how they have written our history. But academia alone is not going to bring about much changes. This has to be disseminated to other domains as well. So in that way, academicians and researchers also have greater role to play to break down these barriers. At the same time, the other communities, the other from other domains also, there should be a willingness to accept these changes or to negotiate and reflect and think about it. So
how do you think the message can reach out to a broader context of people? Like, especially as you said, academics, you tend to stick to one side and then the other party is totally left alone. So how do you think we can integrate all these factors? Is there any suggestion that you would like to make?
The good thing is that with the internet technology, although there are so many criticisms against it, it's actually a very good time for us to use this platform, because it's easier for us to reach out to a larger number now. And in that way, just our conversation itself here, I'm sure it will create a certain awareness, whether it's debatable or not, but still I'm sure that it will make people to reflect and think about it. So this could be one of the medium. At the same time, I feel that people who have public influences, whether it's social media influencers for that matter now, and those who are constantly in a position to influence others should be more aware of our history and how the wrong interpretation of it is actually affecting not only an individual but us as a community. So more discussions, more awareness will definitely help.
We often hear that with the older generation, there's a gap between understanding or cohesive mutual conversation between the younger generation. So how do you think this Naga community as a whole can come together with a broader perspective to foster understanding, to correct the misconceptions as we are talking about, the Naga identity? How do you think we can achieve that?
When it comes to our Naga culture, we have always had this culture of respecting our elders.
Which is sometimes a barrier, because we always have to maintain that layer.
That's true, that's true. But we have to understand that if we look at the context, see, in earlier context, it was always the elders who had knowledge, because they were the ones who ventured out. Our world were confined within a village only. Beyond the village, it was only our elders who ventured out. So obviously they had more knowledge of the world, they had more knowledge with their experiences of life. In that way, they were the ones who disseminated the knowledge, and in that way, they were the authority in all matters. But we live in a very different context now. And the elder himself or herself may not know everything. Right? Just as the younger one does not, in fact, no individual can be said to know everything. But we have always had the perception that elders know everything. So we have had that culture earlier. But we live in different dynamics now. And I think for our elders also, we need to promote and celebrate the culture that it's actually engaging, communications, two-way conversations that is more meaningful than just one party, whether it's the elder or the younger, who gets to have a say in everything. And when it comes to Naga identity, the Naga identity itself, in earlier context, we never had this identity in the sense that no, we were confined only to villages, clan or tribes. And it's actually just like in Indian context, after colonialism only, we have this India as we know it now. India is a nation, otherwise India was also divided into many kingdoms.
Sub-kingdoms,
it was ruled by different princely princes and kings and so on. And it's only after made of the British rule that the India exists today. Is there similarly even for Nagas also? In the earlier context, we were identified only in terms of tribe. After colonialism only, this Naga identity emerged. Now, while it's good that we all have our own culture and we all have our own history, we also have to understand that we are recognized as a group now, and it has political implication also, Naga identity. And often we may not be that obvious, but there has been cases of tribalism and the threats that tribalism has. So these are some things which we should also keep in consideration. And now that it's not just our village or our world, but whether we like it or not, we are tied to each other's fate. And it's no longer only the Aus or the Sumis, or we can no longer say that it's only the Angami and so on. All of us are Nagas. We are anything that happens to one tribe is definitely going to affect us, whether it's positive or negative. These are some things that now, as a tribe, also as individuals, whether it's young or old, we should all be open to discussions. And at the end of the day, we should always think about the greater benefit, the greater good, I think.
Which many fail to make a mention.
That's true. It's because, see, one negative impact of colonialism has been individualism. In the earlier context, it was always communal values. No one was left behind. It has always been, the profits, the losses, it were all shared. But after colonialism, it has come down to individuals. That is why such kind of values, no communal values, this concern for others are being lost. And these are some cultural practices, some cultural values which we should actually bring back.
When we see the evolution of Naga identity and practices, especially relating to headhunting, shaping the present-day perception of Naga self-identity, how do you think it has evolved? Or even there are songs or music that has been produced that seem to glorify headhunting. So how do you see that, the evolution?
Yes. When it comes to headhunting, I personally feel that this headhunting has been over-exaggerated and mistakenly glorified. When we look in history, of course, we had a war system, and in my understanding, and in fact, there are some scholars who have also voiced this out. Tezen Lotong, for instance, in many of his articles, he has argued how this glorification of headhunting or this terminology of headhunting is actually not appropriate. And in my understanding as well, every society at certain points of time have always engaged in warfare. And for Nagas also, there was a time when we did engage in warfare. Now, why societies engage in warfare is because of need to protect ourselves, need to protect our resources. So those questions those aspects are also there. For us, we engaged in war in order to ensure that since we lived in different villages, we had independent village systems. So probably it was to ensure that we were not dominated or attacked or overpowered by others. It was a war strategy of defense and maintenance, I should say, a status of maintaining this fear to not let others attack them. Otherwise, see, if we were just headhunters as they depict us, we would go blindly, you know, killing anyone who may be around us also. But Nagas have never killed people from their own village or their own clansmen or their own family, and it was not like they kept on waging war the entire year round. No, there was a specific period of time when they engaged in these wars. And it's not like they engaged in wars with all the villages. No, certain villages had friendly relations with each other also.
With the history of headhunting practice being clarified, is there any specific challenges or stereotypes that we Nagas face due to the historical narrative of being identified as headhunters? Is there any such instance?
Yeah, see, when we are in Nagaland, we may not realize the negative impact of being termed with such a concept. But let me just cite one interaction we had some years back when we were students in pursuing our masters in Nagaland University. Our department organized a study tour and we went to Sikkim. So when we took a train from Dimapur, and on the way, some kids they were from Haryana. It seems they had gone to Manipur to play hockey, and they were on their way back to Delhi. So they boarded the train as well, and we were sharing the cabins. And when we started having an interaction with them, and we were asking how they first felt when they learned that they were coming towards Northeast to play hockey. And since they passed through Nagaland, we also asked what they think about Nagaland. So not all of them could speak English, so there was one boy among them who spoke, and he was doing the translations for us, and he said that Nagaland seems to be full of forests, full of trees. Of course, they didn't stop, but that's what he said. And the other thing he said was that when we were informed that we are going there for playing, so many people advise us not to go, because they say that there are people out there who hunt people's head, and that there are people out there who eat other human beings as well. So that's one incident I would want to share with others. How our assertion of this identity as a headhunter, how it's actually making people to view us. Then again, there is this one book called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Arundhati Roy. She's a very celebrated writer, Indian writer. Yes. She had won the Booker Prize for one of her book, God of Small Things. In that book, she has mentioned about briefly, but so unfortunate. She mentioned that there was a battalion from Nagaland. First, she has written it in context of a rumor, but she has mentioned that a battalion from Nagaland who eats all kinds of meat, and sometimes they eat human flesh as well. So when I came across that, it really saddens me, and we don't really realize what this impact is having, asserting that we are from headhunters. But this is how the world is seeing us. These are some of the negative impact, I should say.
With gradual growth of local writers, Naga writers especially, do you think there has been changes in the academic perspective towards the Naga history, which tries to challenge or change the existing narrative of Naga identity?
In the academia, when it comes to research papers, there are some works which have counter-narrated, come up with the Naga perspective, and so unlike the earlier times, now we have broader insight into what colonial history or the colonial narratives are not actually apt. So there are some works, but when it comes to the identity assertion, with regard to headhunting or our religion as animism, there seems to be a repetition of it, so which is actually quite unfortunate. But hopefully in the coming days we may be able to move past it. Of course there are some work, but there's still a lot of work to be done on it. That's what I feel.
Okay. In contemporary times, how do Nagas view their historical cultural practices? Do you think there's any benefits or challenges when we foresee reviving our cultural practices?
Compared to some years back, especially in the initial days of conversion, we have heard of how we had completely given up our cultural practices. There have been instances where the newly converts had to burn down their houses or throw away their ornaments as well. 10-20 years back, we see that there seems to be a resurgence, a reevaluation of our cultural attires especially. So this seems to be a very positive trend. On the other hand, this has also created a sort of cultural crisis because we have been taught to understand, or we have been indoctrinated to understand, that anything that has to do with Naga culture is hidden, it's unholy, it's profane for Christianity. So there are still some Christian practitioners who forbid indulging or who forbid the continuity of our cultures. At the same time, when it comes to our identity and when it comes to culture, in every society, a culture does not exist just for the sake of existing. It came into being only because it fulfilled some functions, whether it's in the context of individuals or whether it's in the context of the society. Now, when we look at our cultural practices, all of it had some significance. Even small things like our ornaments, there was meanings behind all those, who could wear it, what age group can wear it, even our food practices, even the meats that we cut during weddings, during marriages, all of it had significances. And all of these were tied to our social structure, it was tied to the ecology, to our economy, to our polity. So it has been difficult for us to fit in foreign culture into our older social structure and the kind of economy or the kind of polity we have still continued with. So of course there has been some realization that adopting this Western culture completely is not working for us. And so we have started to revalue our own cultural practices. But the fear is that, personally, my fear is that we may presume that all of our culture has to be brought back. Now, when it comes to culture, for every society, no culture stays the same. If we have to observe the cultural trends in all societies, every culture undergoes changes. But for us, we always associate our culture with only the traditional practices.
Very true, yes.
So we may think that if we have to value our culture, then we have to bring all of our culture in its entire form as it is. Now I feel that without Christianity or without the intervention of the British, our culture would also not have stayed the same it was. It would have evolved, or it would have changed according to the needs of individuals, according to needs of the society as a whole, as a group. But if we don't realize such kind of aspect, then we may just bring back all of our cultural practices, which may not be very relevant in today's context, seeing the kind of environment that we are in, the kind of social dynamics that we are in now. So those are some challenges.
When we look at the importance of educational institutions, how do you think can contribute to a more nuanced understanding of Naga history and identity? I think Tetsuo College has also been the first one to introduce their archive collection, where people can contribute about conservation or preservation of history and as such. So where do you think it will lead to? Do you think other institutes can even take a role model from them, or?
Yes, definitely. In fact, educational institutions have been one of the agencies who have started the revaluing of our cultural attires. In fact, in our college, Unity College also, every last Thursday of the month, every student and every employee has to wear a ethnic touch. May not be the entire clothing, but has to wear an ethnic touch.
Great.
So that's how the revaluing of our culture attires are being promoted. At the same time, we often have discussions, we organize seminars, workshops on understanding our history, especially from decolonial perspectives. And I feel that, and we also have a cultural day where we try to give chances to every tribe-wise. We give them items to prepare folk songs or folk dance. And since we are done away with the dormitory system now, and it's difficult to socialize, especially in urban areas. We see we don't have much socialization in our cultural affairs. So educational institutions, in fact, many other institutions are also taking up such programs. So this way, it's going. In this way, it's a good progress. In fact, when it comes to educational institutions can play a major role again, because when it comes to knowledge production, like I said, it's actually through education that we are, especially in today's context. Now that we are done away with the dormitory system, the school system has replaced that. So not just the material culture like our clothing, but I think even when it comes to, we hardly study Naga history.
Yes.
Especially at the university level, there are some papers, but see, high schools, undergraduate level, we don't have much content on Naga history. So hopefully with more awareness and with more works, we will be able to battle these challenges.
When we talk about cultural leaders, especially now that almost every tribe and minor communities also have these HOHO and organizations, how do you think they can guide the community towards self-aware understanding of their history?
Although sometimes there are criticisms against these organizations, personally I feel that it's good to have this organization to represent our own groups. And working with, it's not possible to work with larger groups all the time. So definitely having smaller groups, it's always better to disseminate knowledge also. And that way, there is quality interactions, quality decisions can be made. So I feel that these organizations, having these organizations is very positive. But the leaders, the people who represent the people, they should be responsible. And like I said earlier regarding our cultural values, they should be ones who put the interests of the group, the interests of the greater group, not be individualistic, because they represent their people. Eventually, they represent all of us. So more than others, they should be aware of the history. If there is any misinterpretation, if there is something which is adversely affecting us, then I feel that it will be good if they can correct this and know or contribute to removing these wrong portrayals by understanding our history much better.
As we have been discussing, what do you think are key takeaways from our discussion on decolonizing Naga history, and what steps do you think we can initiate to further conversations on this important topic?
I would say that while there are so many aspects that can be analyzed, when it comes to decolonization, we have to first start with how we have been portrayed by others. Unless we learn to reassert and identify ourselves on our own terms, we are not really going to go far. Why? Because when it comes to identity, whether it's the individual identity or whether it comes to group identity, it's not only about how one feels about oneself, but one's identity affects how other person treats us also, whether it's individuals or groups. So now that we live in a global village and we are interacting, we are in a position to interact with so many other people from other nations. And Nagaland itself, is a strategic geographical location in India. So from political aspect also, there are so many things to understand and know the importance of our own identity. So the first step I think we should towards decolonization should be the reassertion of our identity from our own perspective and not from Westerners' perspectives. So derogatory terms and portrayed concepts like use of headhunters, animism. I think we should do away with this first and look towards certain identities. See, for us, our forefathers had friendly relations with each other. They had trade relations with the Ahom kingdoms also. And when we look at history, we see that some Ahom prince had come to Nagaland as refuge, had married Naga ladies also. There are instances like that. And I came across this writing in Vishar Sanyu's book called A Naga Odyssey. So during the 1950s, when there were intense Indo-Naga conflicts going on, and Konoma village was burned. He was from Konoma village, and they had to run away to the jungles for their lives. Since they lived in the jungles for quite some time, so what happened was that since food was scarce in the jungle, they planted small gardens, so that even if they moved away, those who come after them would make use of the garden. So such kind of aspects, right? And then see, every tribe, we have our own festivals, we have our own attires, we had a very well organized inheritance system, agricultural system. Our forefathers had knowledge of the season, of the environment around them, the animals, even the plants. So there's a lot of history, a lot of our history that we can be studying and knowledges that can still be carried in. They are still as relevant today, now that indigenous knowledge system, especially are found to be more sustainable. So these kind of aspects are there. But to begin with, I think we should do away with this misconstruction of understanding ourselves only as a savage or primitive or a headhunter for that matter, or saying that we are enemies.
Perhaps local writers themselves can contribute in correcting
that is
this.
So true. And then what we can do is we can keep on having conversations like this and creating more awareness. There's really a need, especially for those who are sharing knowledge, whether it's writers or social media influencers for that matter, or for public leaders. It's very important that we really have a correct grasp of our history itself.
As our discussion has illuminated the complexities of Naga identity from colonial designations to contemporary perceptions, which underscores the importance of collective re-evaluation and meaningful dialogues for a more self-aware and comprehensive narrative, we hope this conversation will pave the way for a more inclusive and enlightened future. This is NE8, powered by Nagaland Post.